racing on the edge. Sailing and racing on the water is obviously something that most of us have either experienced directly or that it's a leisure activity with their families. But we want to dive much deeper into it today because with SailGP, their second season coming up, we want to know what it's all about. Today, we have Torrey Dorsey. He's the head of sales for APAC, a former IMG and Infront member of their teams, has joined SailGP. And obviously my first question for Torrey will be, so how is it for you ending up now on the property side, coming from an agency side here? Good afternoon to Singapore, by the way, Torrey, and good to have you here.
Thank you for having us, Eric. It's a pleasure to reunite with you, having last seen you at the SPIA Asia conference and awards. Yeah, I mean, that transition for me, I think it's, from agency to rights holder has been seamless, and can I say I enjoy the rights holder side a bit better? But I had also kind of the move to SailGP I had spent 4 years commercializing the properties that are held by the Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club as well prior to IMG. So there was some insight regarding sailing and the opportunities that lie within the realm of that sport and lifestyle.
Great. Well, good to see you here, Torrey, and thank you for joining us today. And yes, I mean, you've been a big supporter of what we're doing with SPIA, so I'm very happy to have you on our webinar. So Tim Godfrey, he's the Chief Marketing Officer from SailGP, and he has a similar journey. He's also coming from the Formula E side, but he has had broadcasting and media associations with athletics, football, cricket. So Tim, good morning to you. You're in the UK, so I hope your coffee mug is next to you. How did you end up now after all the different sports with sailing? How did you end up here?
Morning, Eric. Morning, Torrey. Yes, so you're right. So my experience is really quite varied in that I've been across the production side, the rights holder side, and agency side internationally. And I guess SailGP culminated in me joining about 1.5 years ago. And I really saw a big opportunity to take, which is quite a niche sport, and really bring it and market it to the masses. So really using my experience from Formula E and ITM productions and bringing all that together and kind of looking at how we can really grow a new sport internationally. And that's the challenge we face at the moment.
Yeah. Great. Well, Tim, welcome here to the webinar series, and thanks for being up so early.
No worries.
Let's talk a bit, before we get started, the house rules are the same as we've had it over the last few months. We will upload some polls, so we would appreciate the feedback from everyone. Please drop your good morning wishes in the chat box and use the Q&A button to ask your questions for the panelists. We will address most of them hopefully by the end of the session. We have a huge list of questions from my side already prepared. Not sure we're going to get through all of these, but let's get started. We want to talk SailGP, but I think, Torrey, it would be very good if you maybe set the stage a little bit about the sailing industry from a federation, competitions, because maybe not everybody is very familiar with the structure of sailing, and then leading us into SailGP and how you fit into that ecosystem.
I'll reverse it just a little here. So really, when we talk SailGP, we talk about a media technology sports platform with kind of sustainability at the core. So, and by that, when we talk sustainability, we're saying environmental, social, economic, whatever that may be. And it is a platform that is truly powered by nature. So we have this real authentic, credible story with sailing, obviously, as that platform, but it's almost reversing the narrative, and we're talking about change, and inspiring, uniting, a real purpose, and then that platform delivering on those kind of objectives. So again, it's a little bit of a unique narrative proposition that is very timely as well. SailGP is again a league. There are 8 teams. In year 1, we had 5 teams and 5 events. as we launch season 2, because our season 2, we did race in Sydney in February of this year, and then subsequently our season was canceled due to the COVID pandemic. But looking ahead to 2021 in season 2, we will go from 5 teams to 8 teams, and then somewhere around 6 to 7 events. And again, that's very fluid, as many people can understand, given the kind of return and resurgence of COVID and the impacts of that being a kind of a global league where we're racing around the world. But and again, from a sailing perspective, where do we sit in the landscape of sailing? And often we get asked the question, the first comparison is obviously the America's Cup. SailGP was founded by Larry Ellison of Oracle Notoriety, and obviously he was a competitor in the America's Cup and created SailGP post his America's Cup campaign. So, there are similarities there in terms of what we do with technology and innovation. But in comparison to that, where with the America's Cup, where it's very cyclical, you don't know where it's going to be and when it's going to be, or who's actually going to participate, we've created something that's a bit more understandable and a bit more concrete, meaning we know we're going to have X number of teams and X number of events, and it's every year, and therefore there's a much stronger commercial proposition, media proposition to our property. But again, where it sits, I suppose you've got the America's Cup. I think the closest thing, the first iteration of our format was the Extreme Sailing Series. So there's no doubt that they were the kind of the forebearers. Unfortunately, they're now defunct. So the existing ones that often stand out, people will mention the America's Cup, the Ocean Race, World Match Racing Tour, and then you've got any number of owner-driven or owner racer events, things like the Sydney to Hobart. When we talk about the Sydney to Hobart or Hamilton Race Week or the Middle Island Sea Race, that is normally where you can have an owner who can hire kind of the top sailors or the top athletes in the world to sail with him. We're more like a kind of a motor racing scenario where we have the top athletes. We have pretty much every top sailor. So from Sir Ben Ainsley to Tom Slingsby, Nathan Outridge, Ron Kirby, these guys are you have Olympic gold medalists, you have ocean race winners, you have America's Cup winners. So we really are kind of part of a pathway for a professional career for the sailors outside of, say, sailing for a privateer or the likes of an ocean race, which again is offshore, whereas we're very close to the spectators and much closer to shore. So the proposition that we present is very different to the other other sailing disciplines that are out there.
Okay, just a quick follow-up question there. Can you explain just very briefly of how is the sport organized in terms of a federation? There is the World Sailing Federation. How do you fit in there? Is this is SailGP a private race, or is it endorsed? Is it an Olympic sport? Just to give a little bit of a background, maybe, of how the sailing as a sport is organized from a structural point of view.
Yeah, we are recognized by World Sailing. The Olympics, so and many of our athletes are also Olympians. So they're really dividing their time, and that's not to say that they could not go off and do another sailing event as well. But so some of the athletes are dividing their time. They have a responsibility to their national federations. For instance, the Spanish team, I believe all 5 or a majority of have qualified for the Tokyo Summer Olympic Games. And that, you could really almost identify sailors almost across all the teams that are dividing their time really between the Olympics and SailGP and or other properties. But right. Yes, we do sit, we are recognized by World Sailing, but in terms of the rules, we govern the property.
Great. Tim, your day-to-day with SailGP, what's on your head? What's going on there? What keeps you awake?
Yeah, so on my day-to-day, quite a lot, I would say. So within the media and marketing function, I have broadcast and content on one side and kind of your brand promotion and marketing on the other. And I guess, you know, during the pandemic, we've had to really double down on the content and digital side. So that was our big opportunity, you know, during when there's no events, to really kind of promote the sport in a bit of a different way. So working with our partners, looking at our gaming proposition, and figuring out exactly which audience we want to focus on. You know, when we started SailGP, there was this kind of perception that we wanted to kind of redefine the sport, which in turn meant we wanted a completely new audience, which I think in the long term, we still want that new audience. So we want to branch out into water sports and racing fans and extreme fans. But for the time being, my time is spent now on how do we reach the maximum amount of sailing interested people globally. So the digital team are, you know, they're working on paid media campaigns, they're working on content strategy, they're working on our gaming proposition, and really looking into the new season, it's how do we improve the product? So how do we improve the broadcast production, delivery and editorial? How do we improve our editorial across our digital content? So working with all our teams. So, you know, ultimately we want to deliver a consistent product to market 52 weeks of the year. And really that's all about having an always on approach. So it's not just about the live events, it's about everything that goes on in between the live events. So because there's been no live events, the marketing element has been, I would say, a little bit less, but that will start to ramp up, you know, the turn of the year. We'll start promoting, you know, in earnest, those live events coming up in April. So yeah, the day-to-day is fairly varied, but we've gone for a very integrated approach across content and marketing. And as Torrey outlined, you know, the benefits of a championship like SailGP is that it's annual, it's consistent, the teams are consistent. You know, we've got some of the world's best athletes. And I think if you look at the title of the seminar today, you know, SailGP Racing on the Edge, it's all about pushing boundaries, being innovative, and highlighting the skill level of these athletes, you know, and the athleticism and the ingenuity, and the fitness. And so it's really kind of how do we package all of this up and deliver a great product to the market that is accessible on multiple platforms in multiple languages. So that's the snapshot of the day-to-day at the moment.
Great.
And just to highlight, because Tim, I'd say the Racing on the Edge was derived from a new exclusive content series that's really credit to Tim and his team. And if for those on the webinar, if you haven't seen it and you have access to YouTube, I mean, some of it is, I don't profess to come from a sailing background, but I'm a sports person and I like following sports. And I think that content is really indicative of what we're trying to do, because it's unbelievable when you go behind the scenes and you look at what these guys are doing with training. You look at one of the latest episodes with the Spanish team and the challenges that they're facing with the Spanish Federation and SailGP, which I thought, wow, this is a little bit controversial here, but the insight, it's unbelievable. And then when you talk about the likes of a Kai Hurst, who, in Australia, the guy's a national hero, not for sailing, he's an Olympian, an Ironman, so the level of skill and the athletes that are involved is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, I think what we're trying to do here is put the athletes, Eric, at the center of the championship. If you look at global, successful global sports properties around the world, they have star athletes driving the conversation and driving the narrative. So for us, Sir Ben Ainsley, Tom Slingsby, Nathan Outridge, Peter Burling, Blair too, we now have, as Torrey said, the best sailors in the world. So how do we market them? How do we story tell? And SailGP Racing on the Edge, as Torrey mentioned, is our new series that we're going to be launching next year as a kind of 4-part documentary series. And between now and then, we'll be having kind of little short form digital clips that will get released that are a bit of a teaser to that. But we have to become an athlete-driven organization if we're going to market this property globally. There's a favorite stat that I like to roll out at the moment, which is 8 out of 10 sports accounts on Instagram, if you're a sports fan, are you follow 8 accounts of 10, which are all athlete accounts. So, if you're a sports fan, how are you going to connect and how are you going to find a way into SailGP? What's the funnel? We think at some point that will be the athletes. So that's a very key project for us moving into next year.
Well, there's an obvious question coming up. This is all great, but what access do you have to your athletes? I mean, usually you're dealing with agents, you're dealing with media agencies, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So if you want to be an athlete-driven property, what is your access?
It's all access. I mean, there are no barriers, thankfully, with the way we're set up. We own and operate the league and the teams, which gives us unparalleled access. Versus some maybe other sports, which they do find barriers when they're trying to get access for interviews or quotes or comments. So that helps us in creating this kind of authentic, raw content, which is really there to uncover the kind of behind the scenes lives of these great athletes.
Great. So they're going to be involved of created content or creating their own content, and they're pushing it through.
Absolutely. So we want to use, their social media platforms as well as ours, and we want them to be part of the journey as much as the league is creating content. We want the athletes and the teams to be creating content as well.
And this is really beneficial on my side. When we talk about the commercial proposition, and again, having worked with other sports properties, where, as you say, getting access to the athletes can be a painful process. This is a centralized rights ownership. We can deliver a kind of a raft of activation opportunities, basically tailored to meet the objectives of our commercial partners. And that's across the league, whether it's branded assets, category exclusivity, title naming rights, broadcast sponsorship, into the teams with the athletes themselves, delivering money can't buy experiences, endorsements, appearances, bespoke events, team building for staff programs. We don't have to speak to a third party to do that. Right. So from a commercial, from my kind of day-to-day role, this is really a game changer.
Well, when you both said, it was very difficult, obviously, when there was no live sports to stay relevant and so on. And now we're also talking about that digital and content is so important. Where are you sitting right now? I mean, you're a young organization. Where are you sitting in terms of your digital transformation, your digital readiness? Or is there something that you had to overcome or you still have to overcome going forward? But again, I mean, you're a young organization, or is it something that you're already ready for?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think I touched a little bit on this earlier, in that I think our digital transformation, the key question was, where are we focusing in terms of which audience do we want to target? And I think we have that set in stone. We can, 1, develop content for the right audience. We can, 2, target that audience correctly. And 3, we can make sure it's on the right platforms. So when we started, we were kind of building the plane as we were flying in the first year. So we were kind of operating so quickly that we didn't have that time just to, think and strategize a little bit. So I think what we now know is that there are, let's say, 15 million sailing interested fans on the Facebook platforms, for example. So that is a target for us. We want to be able to reach all of those fans, and we want those fans to follow us first. And the reason for that is that once we have critical mass within the sailing market, we can then scale out to the other, potentially bigger bubbles, because quite frankly, once we have that sailing audience, we're not just going to stop there. That's not the end goal for us. The end goal for us is to really branch out into water sports, into the general sports fan, and into extreme sports. So, our digital transformation is about growth, and it's about tailored content. It's about localized content, and it's about being on every single platform we can, and understanding and evolving our production to fit the needs of the consumer, which is always changing. I mean, it's changing daily, in terms of how people consume. So it's really keeping an eye on trends and making sure we are, our content is at the fingertips of people that we want to reach. That's the end goal for us.
Are you and what are your key platforms at the moment? Because we're looking at it, how people on media mainly consume it. I mean, the live races are pretty much on pay-per-view channels.
Sure.
But I know you have an app and you have your social media channels and so on. What are the channels that you're pushing information through right now and engage?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess this kind of goes into our media rights strategy, which if I look at that alongside our kind of non-live strategy, they're no longer exclusive. So what we do is in the content world is one of the same thing, whether that's live, whether that's non-live. And, we aim to have a very rich mix of content on various different platforms. So whether that be the live linear on, premium high quality sports channels, but then we have a carve out of certain rights on other platforms. So we're feeding our near live clips through all the social media channels. We're feeding, mid to long form documentaries on YouTube and on the team accounts. So what we're looking for is a 52-week year program, literally from January to December, which we can deliver. And goes into Torrey's point, when we're discussing with partners, this is not just about the 7 events. This is about an always on content proposition, which is live and non-live across multiple platforms. So it's a holistic approach, Eric, and what we hope that will deliver is scale growth, but also focusing in key markets. So we have the 8 teams, and they're our key markets. So it's a simple proposition for us, and then we'll have our growth markets that we want to move into. But where we focus our kind of resource and marketing dollars will be in those key team markets. So we want to be in a position where the teams have growth as well. So back to you. So in short, we have a kind of hybrid media rights strategy, which is traditional sports pay TV, free to air carve outs, digital and social media carve outs, so that the consumer sat at home or on the bus or on the tube or walking in the street can access SailGP material. That is fundamental to the growth the growth strategy that we have moving forward.
Right. Yeah, and Torrey, maybe it would be good to just explain a little bit of how commercially you are set up between the teams and SailGP, because when we're looking at the content, understanding is that the teams are creating their content, and obviously you're creating content from SailGP. How does it translate then in terms of the commercial approach?
Yeah, so the structure is that within SailGP, I would have a counterpart. I have a counterpart in the US, a counterpart that looks after Europe and EMEA, and then myself in Asia Pacific. Each team will act almost as a separate entity within SailGP, of course. And those teams have their own CEO, and they have their own management structure and athletes. So they operate almost independent of one another. I'm there to assist with the sales for all of the teams in Asia Pacific, as are my counterparts with the teams that sit in their region. So, at this point in time, I have a kind of a direct responsibility or accountability for Australia, Japan, and New Zealand. And then looking, during season 1, obviously China was part of the league as well. But I work closely with the teams in terms of the commercial proposition for those teams, and or also events that are held in their home team markets. In addition to that, I'm also part of the global sales team. So I'm also selling the league within the region. As some people may know, we had an investment by Endeavor or IMG into SailGP earlier this year. So equally, we have access now to the kind of the wider IMG sales force. So me personally, I've reunited with a lot of friends and former colleagues out of the IMG offices, whether it be in Melbourne, Sydney, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore. So they are also actively selling both team and league. And again, within those IMG, say the IMG APAC offices, the focus is again, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, or the teams that sit within their regions. But adding the kind of the IMG, the addition of IMG has certainly added to our reach. Obviously, they have a number of other properties that they're selling, but SailGP is now part of that conversation within their portfolio as well.
But they're also part of they're also your distribution partner, is that correct? So they're not the production partner, but they're your distribution partner.
Correct, yeah. So as Torrey said, as soon as IMG and Endeavour came on board, we got access to their global media rights sales network, which was fantastic for us. So yes, they will represent us in all markets, selling our media rights licenses to broadcasters and platforms globally. But it works very well because it means that, again, it goes back to our localized strategy, whereby obviously if SailGP is HQ'd in London and New York, if we have a broadcaster conversation in Spain, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, all these simultaneous conversations going on, the IMG representatives in each of those markets can have those conversations on a very local level, which is super helpful. I mean, it's controlled centrally, but ultimately there's a local strategy in each of our key markets.
And it's certainly been advantageous, I would say, during this period of time with global travel restrictions, in that we're still able to actively sell, obviously virtually, but I also have people on the ground. I have IMG representatives on the ground in those markets.
Right. When you're looking at currently you have 8 teams, you have 8 key markets. What comes first when you're looking at expansion? Are you looking first at a certain market where you would like to be and then try to establish a team? Or is somebody going to try to establish a team? They come to you and say, well, we want to participate, and then you find a home market for them. What's the thought process here? What comes first?
I'll take that tip. It's part of my day-to-day. So, at the moment, there are eight boats. So although a team will come in, I mean, ultimately, we own, or Larry Ellison owns, all of the boats. So there are only 8 boats available. So ultimately, you want to get to a stage where, just like any other sports franchise, that those teams become financially solvent, and if they're not, just like any other sports franchise, they can be replaced by another team. So at the moment, there is already expressed interest from 2 to 3 additional teams, to join. But again, we only have a defined number of spots on the grid. To go back to your question, yes, it can be one of 2 approaches. I mean, at the moment, I'm in conversations with countries that would like to host an event with the ambition to then building a team, and vice versa. There are teams that are saying, I want to participate as a team, and therefore that would trigger a home team event. Now, unlike other sailing properties, where there's a catch here is that we have a nationality rule. So unlike an America's Cup team that can be, representing Switzerland and have no Swiss sailors, or the US and have 1 American sailor, within SailGP, those teams, if they're 5 sailors, they're all of the same nationality. So the US team, they're all American. The Spanish team, they're all Spanish. The only exception to that is Japan. And the reason for that is that we have to develop the talent to actually sail, or let's say fly the boat, because the boat's actually foiled, they're flying over the water. So some of the positions on the boat, it includes a flight controller, someone that is literally flying the boat. So in the case of Japan, and during season 1, China, there were not enough local sailors that were qualified enough, and that's not just ability, that's safety as well, to actually fly the boat safely. So, the Japanese team, many of them were part of the SoftBank Team Japan America's Cup team. And now we're in the process of developing talent to fill the spots that are occupied by foreign sailors. So at the moment you have, say, 2 of the 5, it started with 2 Japanese sailors and 3 expatriate sailors. It's now down to 2 expatriate sailors and 3 Japanese sailors. And each year they have to lose another foreign sailor. So, you know, there's a pathway behind all of this. So what I think people see as SailGP, they're seeing kind of the flower on the tree, the tip of the iceberg, because behind the scenes, there's actually a lot happening from a grassroots, a youth development, our SailGP Inspire program, as it's known, you know, that's developing talent within these markets as well, to ensure that the teams have enough talent to field the, you know, to field the places on the boat.
Yeah. Which one is one of the markets where you think you really want to be in? And it can be from a commercial point of view, but it can also be from a strategic point of view in terms of audiences. Is there an area where you're not covered? I mean, you're North America, you are in Australia, New Zealand, you're France, Spain, Denmark. So what's the one area or region you would love to be in there?
I think
another
there's
place in Southeast Asia.
I'll let Tim answer from a media perspective. From a commercial or a team perspective, you know, Italy, again, just from a sailing perspective, you know, if we had Italy and Germany, you would add to the level of competitiveness and talent. China, you know, from a commercial perspective, you know, I would love to return to China. So within Asia, I think China, I mean, there are discussions with Korea, but again, not event, not team. So there's some countries where we're saying, well, we'd love to be there from an event perspective. And there's a demand or there's interest, but to field a team from, say, Korea, we wouldn't have one sailor to start with. So it wouldn't fit within the rules of the league. And
yeah, I think, yeah, from a media perspective, I mean, certainly Italy and Germany, are, you know, they're big established, not only commercial markets, but media markets as well. So, you know, and part of the strategy is, as Torrey, I think, mentioned, is to have an event and a team in the same location, which drives media and marketing value. So if we can assume we have that model for 8 events or 10 events, you know, I would hope we'd be able to get, for example, a free-to-air deal in each of those markets based upon the fact that there is an event and a team from the same market. And I think that's really the focus. Doesn't always work in all cases, because, you know, if we have 10 events, you would expect a couple of those 10 events maybe not to have teams, but then they might, you know, they're there for another reason. It might be a commercial reason or a host venue fee, or it's a bit more of an exotic location. So I think much like other annual global sports events, there'll be a mixture of events. And for me, it's all about, are they an established media market? Can I get a free-to-air deal there, which is going to drive viewership, which then drives sponsorship return and return on investment for the league. So, you know, there are various kind of KPIs that we look at for each one.
Yeah. Are you going through something like a host city bidding process, or, you know, how does it work when you choose a location? And then we had a question earlier already coming in before the webinar. It's like, what are the pre and post promotions that have been tied to the host city, just to make sure that maybe there's, from a tourism perspective, even more, you know, content available and more marketing value available by promoting the destination, not just on race days, but before and after as well?
Sure. I mean, Torrey, I'll take the promotional aspect first. You know, before every event, probably 3 to 4 months out, depending on which market, we will look to start promoting that event. So immediately, you know, that city or that host venue is getting the value from our global platform. The real value comes obviously when we touch down in that particular market, and then the increased value is obviously on that postcard view on the host broadcast world feed, which goes internationally, which is the biggest marketing tool that we have, quite frankly. So I think there's definitely a kind of pre-promotion element. There's during the event, which is where we see the big peak. And then, you know, the week after the event, which is still all of the highlights content, lots of the broadcasters are scheduling repeats of our highlights or review show. So the host city is really not just buying that 3-day event or 2-day event. They're buying a period of, I would say, 4 to 5 months, really. And what we're trying to get to the point of all of the events are promoting the other events coming up as well. So it is promoting a calendar. It's not just promoting one event. It's promoting a series, a league, and the teams and all of its constituent parts. So it's not just about, we arrive and there's a firework and we go and we don't come back. We want to leave a legacy in these territories.
And that kind of legacy is exactly what I was referring to, say, in the case of Japan, where the team may be out there competing on the circuit throughout the year, but behind the scenes, just 2 weekends ago, we were doing a foiling camp in Wakayama City, for kids, and that was being done with the sailors. Obviously, they're at home at the moment, so they're readily available to do things like that. But ultimately, in the case of that team, they have to be nurturing talent. And they also have talent. So the likes of Leo Takahashi, one of the sailors that's, again, he's qualified for the Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo. So he also has his Olympic ambitions. But yes, I mean, with the home team markets, yes, we did go to market and put out an RFP, for host cities, because ultimately, I would say looking ahead to season 2, 7 of the events would likely be in home team markets. The one that would be left out would be Japan, and the reason for that are the delay of the Olympic Games. So having an event in Japan during the Olympic year was a little bit restrictive, particularly timing. And when we look at the calendar as well, it's great to have, we say we have home team markets and preferred markets, and we like to go anywhere and everywhere. But, obviously you have to take into consideration their financial considerations, but the other big one is logistics. And we often get asked the question, the time between events, and that's because we move the boats on boats. So I just went through an exercise of trying to understand how to get the boat, say, from Spain to Hong Kong, for instance, for a proposed event. And it was going to take 44 days to get from point A to point B. So suddenly you're saying, well, within a 12-month period, taking out, holidays, whether it be Chinese New Year in China, Christmas, New Year's, when you look at the schedule, there's certainly going forward, there may be limitations. Ultimately, we would like 10 events, but logistically, what's possible depending on where those cities are. And again, keep in mind, we have almost an obligation to our home teams as well, to those home team markets, to race in those countries.
Yeah, I loved what you said earlier, that you need a flight controller on the crew, because your F-50Ss are going up to what, 50 knots? That's like 60 miles an hour. So that is flying. Question for both of you is, how important are the regulations when it comes down to the technical requirements? I mean, are you monitoring things similar like what's happening in motorsports? Because I mean, technology gives speed advantages, and is that really something that is at the forefront of regulating or making sure that everybody has equal opportunities of winning, equal chances? Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, certainly from a media product standpoint, Eric, what we look to create is a competitive product, for the audience. So the fact that these boats are all single design absolutely helps in that goal. And I don't envisage a point where we won't be single design, so it is all about the sailor skill and the sailor ingenuity. So whoever wins SailGP is undoubtedly, they're undoubtedly the most talented sailors, so when we're trying to position the media product to broadcasters and to digital platforms and to our audience, this is the most competitive. There is no doubt about that. This is the most competitive series. So for me, when I look to build this product out, that is absolutely key to that. It's central to that.
It's one design, or open source racing. So, and again, we do get asked the question, particularly when there's a say a brand, whether it be equipment or tech, that says, I would like to align myself with one team, but it's all the same. So all the boats, it's one design. Every boat is identical. So it does come down to the athletes. Each team has a data analyst, okay? And kind of we're feeding thousands, tens of thousands of, there's so much information going up into the Oracle Cloud that then comes down and goes to the data analyst within each team. That data is shared. So team A can see what team B is doing, team B can see what team C is doing. So it's very unique. So the losing team, the 8th team in any one race, can actually see what the first place team was doing throughout the race and how best to adapt. So it really does come down to, it's down to the athletes and skill set, and the data analyst is just as an integral part of that team as everyone else, because they're the ones that are between racing that are feeding that information back into the sailors. But otherwise, that's where it also gives us, from a franchise or investment point of view, that it's one boat. There's economy of scale. There's shared costs. The onshore, the technicians and the mechanics. That's one team that actually services all of the teams with the assistance of the sailors, of course. But it's a very, very unique scenario.
Yeah. What other technology innovations are happening, or how else are you using technology? I mean, obviously, what you mentioned earlier, your Oracle Cloud and your open source data sharing, this is very important. What other technology innovations, or how else are you using technology within your property?
I think from a broadcast perspective, this is where we've seen real success. From day one, we've done a remote production solution, so we don't travel with a big outside broadcast truck to our events. Everything is fed back over fiber to London. So when we're in Sydney, our live pitches are being cut in Ealing in West London. So from the outset, we've looked to really innovate in this space. One of the things that we've patented as a product is our augmented aerial graphics on water, which is a company called Liveline FX, which allows us to, from a storytelling perspective, tell the story of a race, of a SailGP race, like no other. So without those augmented graphics, it's very hard to know where the boats are going, or who's on which boat, or what the speed is. So they're two elements that we've really innovated in. The other one, which Torrey can build on as well, is our new partnership with Acronis, which is going to allow us to, in real time, translate the audio from the sailors on each boat into key languages, which again is part of our aim to educate the audience and assume that they don't know what's going on the boat. So they're probably three key areas that I would say that we've really kind of pushed the boundaries in.
And I would say from a kind of hardware perspective, and I know I've just seen a question as well. I'm going to address a question from Glenn, who's because it kind of feeds into the narrative. But from a hardware perspective, for instance, further developments around the wing. So it's not a sail; it's actually a wing. Think of it like an airplane wing. In season 1, that wing was a predefined height, and you couldn't change it. Now, again, if you think of it like Lego, we can take one piece out, so you can make the wing either taller or smaller depending on the wind conditions, which was not something that we had during season 1. But now we can adapt so that the product that we're delivering is still of a high quality, irrespective of the conditions. So, I mean, you're talking about a boat that can take 11 knots and go 35 knots. So, you really, it's something spectacular to see. Where I want to get into Glenn's question, it was regarding being able to go to like a neutral site, like a stopover or a non-racing promo, if you will. And the reason that we don't do that is we're always kind of redefining the boat. So the boats live in Auckland. We have created SailGP technologies. And so the boats then get moved back to Auckland at the end of the season to be kind of redeveloped or redefined. And that could be anything. Like at the moment, we're working around the foiling technology. What can we do to actually go faster? the wing sail, as I mentioned before, hydraulics on the boat. And then it goes even beyond, you know, say the broadcast or the hardware that you see, to things like the partnership we have with Tesla in Sydney. So where we put solar panels on top of a shipping container, we eliminated the use of a generator to power the batteries that power the hydraulics on the boats. Those batteries are now charged using solar power. So the sun charges the Tesla battery pack then recharges the batteries that are used. So it's all feeding into that sustainability narrative, keeping in mind that that's at the core of SailGP.
Very good, very good. We had in our headline topics the crossover from sailing into esports, and my first esports sailing experience came in Thailand a few years back doing Sportacore, where I attended a meeting, and I was wondering why sailing wanted to venture into esports. But what came out of this one was that doing a competition, you know, someone who had absolutely no experience in sailing won a competition because he was able to read data so well that he actually at the end was recruited, and he became part of one of the crews. Question is, do you have a certain esports strategy, or what learnings are you taking from esports? And then at the later stages, do you offer certain career opportunities, for instance, like for data analysts or so on, within SailGP?
Sure, Torrey, I'll take the SailGP question first. So I think that, you know, we need to make the distinction here. So at the moment, we don't have an esports property, I would say, or a product. We have a gaming proposition. So we've got a partnership with Virtual Regatta, which has allowed us to launch our SailGP gaming platform, which has been really successful for us, but in different ways to maybe what we thought. When we launched it, we thought that this was going to reach a new audience outside of sailing, but the game on Virtual Regatta is particularly technical. It's quite hard to play, so actually you need to spend a lot of time on it before, you know, if you're a non-sailor like me, if I tried to play it now, I would crash out probably after the first leg or the first mark. So what we've seen actually is that it's really grown our avid sailing fan base, and we have a very loyal fan base on SailGP right now. So again, it's just part of that funnel, you know. So I think to date we've had 800, nearly 900k views on our SailGP product, you know, over 30,000 engagements. So it's for me, as part of the media and marketing mix, it's a fan engagement tool. So will the participants of SailGP then go and watch the live linear show, or will they go and consume content elsewhere? So yes, so to me, it's been a really interesting exercise, in that initially I thought that it was going to branch our audience out and grow it, but actually it's really just doubled down in that sailing market. And you know, again, we've got a very loyal fan base who play it quite regularly.
Torrey, any thoughts on you in terms of the crossover? Which once your athletes retire, I mean, this is always, you know, the athlete welfare has become such a big buzzword and so on. What are the opportunities for your typical athletes afterwards, or what are the opportunities for people for having a cross-career change into something like a property like SailGP? What opportunities are available there?
I think it does. I mean, each team, even within the teams, I think there's an opportunity to advance kind of from say a sailing or an athlete into, whether it be the management of the team, into the data analyst and analyzing what's happening. I mean, who better to analyze what's happening with the performance of the boat than an athlete themselves? So I think there is a greater opportunity for them to make a career, say a career path out of SailGP. And I think it was really interesting. I alluded to that last issue of Racing on the Edge with the Spanish team and the challenges that they were facing trying to balance their obligations to the Spanish Sailing Federation and SailGP. And one of the sailors said it succinctly, you know, he's like, yes, I want to win a medal, but yes, I also want a career in sailing, and SailGP presents that opportunity for me. Yes, a medal is national pride, but ultimately, it's amateur at the highest level, and I want that. But then on the other side, it's like, but this is my career. This is, how I can actually support myself and derive an income. And, so that there is that, we sit at that kind of crossroads. And I think, but again, behind the scenes, SailGP Inspire, our Inspire program, where when we go into host cities and we're delivering, sailing for kids that are underprivileged or may have never sailed before. A second part of that program is working with the elite sailors within that local market, and introducing them to foiling and introducing them to the team. And then lastly, it's the internship program, where you're giving kids the opportunity to understand, well, what are the kind of the STEM aspects of what we do. And ultimately, I think you want to be able to funnel out of that SailGP Inspire program into the teams, whether it's from an athlete perspective or from a team professional management perspective.
Good. From looking at sailing in general, it's seen as really a luxury sport. It's not a cheap sport. It's not for everybody. Where do you feel like that SailGP has an edge over other competitions? For instance, if it's the America's Cup or Volvo Ocean Race, in just terms of budgets, do you think that in 3, 4, 5 years you're able to sustain with the way you're set up financially in terms of expenses and revenue potential versus some of the competitors within the water sports areas?
I think we're the cheapest option. It's, in comparison, when you talk about running an America's Cup campaign, to be competitive, you're saying 250 million, 300 million, Ocean Race, 25 million, someone that runs a Hamilton Island Race Week, Sydney to Hobart, 25 million. I mean, we're a fraction of that cost. So from a commercial investment perspective, there's no comparison. I think looking beyond and when I said we were a media tech sports platform, what excites me most is that we're becoming a kind of a lab for innovation, a lab for technology, a lab for sustainability, and SailGP and the sailing part is just part of that. But what excites me is about what we're doing with some of our commercial partners and the discussions that we're having with potential partners, and how they're using us to trial and error, new and innovative ideas and hardware and software that they can then take to market, as you see in, whether it's motorsports or cycling or other properties. So for me, that's what's really exciting. It's not just about what you're seeing, on the broadcast, but actually what's going on behind the scenes and the changes that we're able to make to the boats that have implications outside of SailGP.
So what's your elevator pitch? If you have your 30 seconds, why SailGP?
Tim, why SailGP?
Well, I was going to add to your point there that, Eric, the audience that we have right now and the audience that we build is the most valuable kind of sports sponsorship audience, right? So from 25 to 45 and male, that's the audience that we have. So from a revenue perspective, when we're looking at sponsorship, for example, whether it's B2B brands or consumer brands, they want to reach that audience, and that's the audience that we have. So to me, that's super important. The other thing I would say sorry, a question just came up there. The other thing I would say is that we are not only a sports entertainment platform, so we're fan centric, and we're best in class, but we're also purpose driven. So we have this inherent link to sustainability. So the Race for the Future campaign that we launched last week is all about climate action. It's all about awareness of what's going on in our environment, and we can use the SailGP global platform as awareness for that. So our partnerships with Tesla, ePropulsion, Evoy, E1, these are all partnerships to really accelerate change to our environment. So to me, that's the elevator. Torrey, your thoughts?
I think I'm just reinforcing what you said. I think more than ever, and you see it across all sports and entertainment properties. I mean, you know, I think more than ever, we have a responsibility. And again, a responsibility, is it environmental? Is it social? Is it economic? I mean, those are all embedded in that sustainability. You know, and we as SailGP are looking to change, inspire, unite, and really be a purpose-driven property. But ultimately, Eric, our commercial partners have a moral responsibility.
When you're looking at, you know, you have some incredible brands being part of sailing, if it's your Rolex, your Volvos, your Emirates, and so on. What are some of the brands that you think you would like to see within SailGP or associate to SailGP? Or what do you think, what categories and brands will probably look at entering sailing and maybe SailGP as a property?
I think you're going to get, I mean, you know, the likes, you know, a global partnership with Rolex, with Oracle. Obviously, we during the pandemic, we were very fortunate to sign a Cronus. And then you look at some of the team sponsors, the likes of Ineos, Rockwool. I think, you know, there's going to be a natural affinity with the traditional sailing brands. What excites me are those brands like the partnership with Tesla, for instance. Those brands that were able to, it's not just about a branding exercise or putting them on the side of the boat or entertaining their clients, but to actually use SailGP as a lab of sort. And what are the possibilities? What can you do? How fast can we go? I mean, how fast do we want to go? When you go, and again, there's so much, we have so much content out there to explain what is happening with the boat. You know, it's the boats, as I say, are flying, they're on foils, but, you know, cavitation, the water is boiling around the foils. What is that? You know, there's so much going on around that tech and innovation realm. I would just like to have a greater dialogue with companies in that space. Companies in, you know, oil and gas, what are they doing around hydrogen? What are they doing around synthetic fuels? What are they doing? Renewable energy? How can we power our support fleet, which at the moment, you know, petrol based, and we want to get away from that, which is why, as Tim said, e-propulsion, you know, the electrification, e-mobility, you know, there's so much crossover. There's so many opportunities because, again, the topic isn't just sailing. It's saying, whoa, we've broadened that narrative.
Very good. Tim, maybe we're short on time. Maybe just your thoughts of where do you see SailGP in the next 5 years? You're going into your second season, adding another 5 years in it. Then after 7 years, you're an established property. So where do you see yourself? Where are you going in 5 years?
Yeah, I think we're still in that establishment phase, you know, across whether that be media rights, broadcast, content, you know, we're still creating the product, you know, so there's still lots we need to do to make that a sticky product in the market. But I'll go back to my original point about the elevator pitch. You know, we want to create a best-in-class sports entertainment, fan-centric proposition that is based around our 3 core pillars, which is sustainability, tech, and entertainment. But everything we do, whether that be storytelling, our work with our partners, our broadcast, it's purpose-driven. And I think if we stick to those principles, in 5 years, 10 years, you know, the aim is to be a must-have sports property, right? So whether you're a broadcaster or a digital platform, you know, we want to have created critical mass, which has a scalable audience and a relevant audience and an affluent audience that brands and partners are interested in. And if we can get to that point, then I think we would have done a good job.
Very good. Great. Guys, Torrey, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love the discussions on SailGP. I appreciate your support. We are right on time. We will upload the recording of this one for anybody who wants to look afterwards. And then we're going to see everyone again next week when we're talking about the Sports Explorer. And we're going to have a very familiar face coming on board for this one. And it's going to be a nice little add-on to what we talked about today. You know, the Sports Explorer will be talking at tourist destinations, looking at sports and how those two combine. Once again, today was SailGP, Racing on the Edge. I wish you guys good luck. Torrey and Tim, pleasure having you here this morning. Everybody stay safe and have a great day ahead of you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.